Yeah, I know it's 11:31. I just wanted more people to be here before we started, dude. Let me know when you guys can hear me and if it sounds good before I start. Can you guys not hear me? That's one hell of a delay. Okay. And so I guess there will just be 20 seconds for the people viewing this in the future where they go, why is he waiting for people to answer him? It's like a 20-second delay. I assume it sounds good. The quality is significantly better here in the room I'm staying in, right? Than before. I really do apologize for the live stream with Lisa Sue. But I noticed literally no one else was live streaming that for some reason. So I just had to do it myself, right? So I hope that was all good for you. The live chat was fun. It seemed like most of you got to understand it. But yeah, let's get through it. I was going to do this tomorrow in the morning or something. I know this is quite literally the worst time to do this live stream in terms of who's awake, literally in Europe or in America. This is the worst time to do it. But at the same time, I want to do it while the ideas are fresh in my head and I'm perfectly cognizant. So here we go. We're going to do it right now in the middle of the night for everyone. And anyways, let's get going. So yeah, I talked to Jim Keller for 15 minutes, actually. We had a conversation about the future of CPUs, if you can believe it. So that'll be the last thing that happened, though. But I'm going to work through everything else I did today. So save your questions, by the way. And if you tip me, I will answer your questions. But maybe save your Jim Keller questions for the end, right? So we do this in order. Jim Keller's the guy who invented. Jim Keller made all of the good CPU architectures. Someone just asked that. All right. Okay, so first of all, was the first AMD press conference, and honestly, there wasn't too much information in that one. A lot of it was the same slides you guys were used to seeing. However, I will be doing a video on die shrinking IO dies after seeing that presentation, because there seems to be a fundamental misunderstanding about IO dies that I still just can't seem to have get across to you. But I think I'm going to do one more try to convey to you guys why they're going to die shrink IO dies. And the reason is this: the reason they haven't shrunk IO is not because there aren't benefits. It's just they aren't worth it yet. It's not useless to shrink the IO. It's more challenging than shrinking cores, and the benefits aren't as good. But there are still benefits, and they did not say that they couldn't do it. They just said it wasn't worth it. And this brings me to my next point. Zen 2 and 3 are sister architectures. Then you guys need to understand this. Zen 2 and 3, really, right? Because Zen 2 is the most simple idea. Zen 1 was kind of the proof of concept of Infinity Fabric. Think about it. And so Zen 2 was actually splitting it up. And then Zen 3 is adding other packages next to it. Now, if they really wanted to do a full new architecture, they could have done Zen 4. But why? Why not split them up? They're going to die shrink the IO. They just wanted to solve the problems of what it takes to shrink the IO package later so they could get better chips out sooner. That's what you guys got to get. All right, let's move on. Yeah, they talked about Epyc chips. Epyc would be a 1,000 millimeter squared CPU if it was a monolithic die. So literally, you can't even make Epyc. Intel can't even make Epyc chips. Literally, that's how bad this is getting, honestly. And let's keep going through all my notes here. Let's see. There was an interesting slide that I will talk about in another video too. AMD talked about how Zen 2's performance boost was 47% from 7 nanometer, and then I believe it was 11% something else and 17% something else. What that infers is 40% performance increase would still be possible even on 12 nanometer FinFET. That means that there is evidence that AMD is working on like 12 nanometer non-FinFET global foundries, mobile architectures, and other stuff. AMD doesn't just have to use 7 nanometer for Zen. They can make something 50% better than Zen plus and not put it on 7 nanometer if they want to save money. And I think they are. I think that's what that slide suggests. I think that's what I've already heard leaks about. AMD is working on lower cost monolithic dies that will be 50% better than Zen plus. Not as good as Zen 2, but they will be better. And so that's a big deal, people. All right, let's keep moving. There's a lot of stuff I'm covering, guys, by the way. Yeah, I watched ARM's presentation. Honestly, it was very technical, a little dry, but I got the sense that ARM is, if they can just solve their logistics and support and software problems, which takes time, it takes time to have the same logistics and software as Intel. They're going to have some of the most dense, efficient servers ever. And this kind of brings me to the overall point, which is watching all these companies solve problems in their own way. ARM wants the most dense, efficient server chips. That's what ARM wants. AMD wants heterogeneous architectures, on demand chiplets. Here's a hamburger. What do you want on your hamburger? Do you need an APU graphics card? Do you need L4 cache? How many cores do you need? And they want to make custom chips built in 3D stacked per customer. That's AMD's solution. IBM is working on these interesting interchangeable interfaces that can double for both DIMM slot. So what IBM's working on, they have an open they have an open source AMI fabric, right? And what it allows you to do is use either DRAM or NAND or HBM over the same interface, meaning they want to make an interface that has DIMM slots that can have DDR4, GDR6, HBM, and that way you don't need to worry about that. You just put the GPU in and choose the memory you need, the CPU with the memory it needs, and that way you have the most customizable what would I say? Classical server architecture. I'm not classical, but standard, right? This isn't like some kind of die stacking thing. It's a standard type of organized CPU, GPU, and RAM. But they want to be able to customize it in a very again, I'm forgetting the word, right? In a very standardized way to what we're used to doing, but do it better than everyone else. And so what I'm getting to is ARM, AMD, IBM all seem to be having their own way of scaling things up. They all seem to have their own solutions. And Intel worries me because I don't see it, honestly. I don't see what Intel's solution is. Intel's doing all of these things I just talked about. They've glued together chips for Xeon, right? They have that, but it uses 400 watts. They have some kind of Infinity Fabric, EMIP. They used it in that laptop I reviewed, but it's not as good as Infinity Fabric. They have all of these cool things, but none of them are the best. So they're doing everything. And it's like Cortex said in my podcast, they've got their finger in too many pies. And it worries me because you've got all these companies like AMD, IBM, ARM, and other startup people I met with today and exchanged business cards who are all working on very, very hyper-specific tasks, and they're all open standards and they're sharing them with each other. When I see Intel spreading themselves thin, it worries me. I worry Intel isn't going to be the best at anything, and so they're not going to win anything, especially when the most important thing they do, their cores, are 10 years behind. It's an old architecture. But yeah, so let's move on. I think I dwelled too long on that point. There was an Intel Optane presentation, and I almost fell asleep. It was literally the same presentation I saw 4 years ago. Like, I don't know. Honestly, Intel Optane's almost a joke here. Seriously, like I hear it as a punchline between engineers. I'm honestly not kidding. I've heard it multiple times. People are just like, yeah, just like Optane. Let's see. And then, of course, there was the keynote with, which to be clear, I thought Optane 3D Point was going to be awesome 5 years ago. Yeah, I want to say that quick too. I remember the first slides for X Point, and it was like 1,000 times better than SSDs, is what I was told. And then a year later, I saw the same presentation. It said 100 times better than standard SSDs, and I went, "Wasn't it 1,000 last time?" And then a year later, I saw it, and it was like 10 times, and I went, what's going on? And now you look at it, it's not even faster. Like it's a complete joke. Optane's a joke. It's expensive. It doesn't theoretically it can be used for hyper specific tasks very well, but everyone else isn't sitting still, right? You have HBM, you have um, standard SSDs over NVMe that are getting faster and faster, and it's really not. I don't know. I don't see. And that's the thing I bring up, and people almost like, "What are you, a noob?" And I am a noob when it comes to this stuff. I work in the automotive industry, really, but when I bring it up, and they go, "No, we don't really care about Optane." But yeah, let's move on. Okay. So, yeah, the AMD keynote, which I recorded with horrible quality, and I apologize, everybody. Um, but I think the live chat was fun, so I think it was worth it. But there was some really interesting developments. I mean, Lisa Su basically confirmed Crossfire is dead, right? Like you could see it in her eyes too, right? If you're there in the audience, you can look at her. I was pretty close to the stage, if you guys noticed. You could see when they asked about Crossfire, she was like almost annoyed she had to talk about it still. Crossfire's gone for the next 5 years, guys. I don't know what to tell you. And moving on, let's see. Yeah, and then I really got the sense that they are so in on HBM. They're going to use HBM on the top Radeon graphics card, I think, again, for sure. And they keep bringing it up. There are so many benefits to HBM. It is going to get cheaper. And Lisa really made it clear. We're like, you see so many things they talk about reference HBM. HBM is not gone. It doesn't matter that it's expensive. It's twice as good as GDR at least. It's going to continue to be used, and AMD is going to use it more and more and more over the years. There was an interesting question about AI that I haven't seen anyone else mention. When they asked, "What is AMD going to do?" Right, and they have cards that they use for like that are competitive, that are gaining some market share in servers for you know training and deep learning. But Vega really isn't meant for that. It can do it well because it's cheap, but it's not really the most efficient. What's interesting is they asked like what their long-term goal is, and Lisa basically said they haven't decided yet. So, and in other words, she said that we don't think the market's decided the best way to do this yet. I don't know how much of that was marketing and how much of that is true. I think most of it is that they don't see that as the lowest hanging fruit when they know they can capture so much of just raw brute force compute market share and server with their current architectures. So they will worry about AI, but it doesn't seem like right away. Threadripper, of course, that was all over Twitter. Hey, Twitter world. That was all over Twitter that Ian Cuttress from Ann Tech was there. And yeah, so I want to be very clear about how funny that was when he asked about Threadripper, because I tweeted about it. So it wasn't just him, too. He, of course, was the one asking the question, but he asked her about Threadripper, and she was just like, "There's more Threadripper coming. Is that good?" And he was like, eh. And you could hear everyone in the audience go, I did, if you watch my video. And I don't know if the quality was, no, the quality cut out then. But, and then which is very unfortunate because that's the best part. And then he goes, okay. And then she goes, well, what about if I told you it's coming pretty soon? And he goes, what does that mean? And everyone, and I went, no. And then the whole audience is just like, And then she just goes, what if I told you it's coming out within a year? And again, me and the entire audience just went, we all moaned. And she goes, all right, we'll announce it in 2019. And they were all, and we all went, yeah, we all clapped. It was honestly very funny. I don't think any of these tweets captured just how funny it was that the entire audience moaned every time she responded until she gave us what we wanted. So yeah, I don't know when Threadripper 3 is coming out for sure, but we'll know, I think, within a few months whether it's leaks or official stuff when it's coming in. And I would definitely Q1 next year, I would say, if not much sooner. And there was a lot of deep learning stuff, which I'm not sure I actually want to dwell on right now, except to say that, and this is obvious, right? The two big things are ASIC's dedicated chips of the long-term future. That was abundantly clear. 3D stacking memory next to specialized cores for running deep learning are the future. Huawei did a presentation about how these Tensor Core GPUs are a tenth the efficiency of these specialized chips. That it really doesn't make any sense. And then there was the presentation of, oh, and then Intel, of course, showed their what was it, a Spring Crest processor, which they claim to be twice as good as V100, twice as good as Volta at deep learning, which is interesting. I'm not sure, right? It's not out yet. So first of all, we need to confirm that with third-party benchmarks. And even if it is, though, I mean, when is it coming out? Mid next year, late this year? I mean, Ampere will be here eventually. So, keep that in mind. And then there was Cerebras, which made a big splash. And that's because, and this isn't a typo in that thumbnail. That's not a typo. They're making a CPU that takes up an entire CPU wafer. So, big silicon wafer, that's the CPU. It's 46,225 millimeters squared. They're literally using the entire wafer to make one CPU. And the way they do it is with a 2D mesh they overlay across all of the chips to make it one giant chip. And then on the ones that are defective, they have the mesh go over that. So it's interesting. It's an interesting solution. However, they didn't say what clock speed it runs at. And we still don't have final benchmarks. They say it's running and working, and yet they won't tell us the clock speed. So we're still going to have to see, but this is exciting stuff. And this is what I've been talking about, is things are about to change a lot, people. There's going to be stacked chips. There's going to be chips we've never seen before. And some of those chips aren't just going to be chiplets. Some of them are going to be monolithic dies the size of an entire wafer. People are going, once everyone accepts, and we finally have accepted that Moore's law is dead, then we can stop trying to chase it and change our perception of how we solve these problems and solve them in different ways. It's kind of like the analogy I used before actually with an engineer is if you think of like weapons in World War I, everyone thought you needed the longest range bolt action rifles. There were bolt action rifles in World War I with 1,000 meter sights. You can't even see 1,000 meters. How stupid is that? That's like us die shrinking right now. The game has changed. Once we realized it was about firing faster, firing different bullets, guns got better. And that's the truth. That's the same with processors. Once we realize it's not just about die shrinking, there are so many ways we can gain performance that aren't just die shrinking. And that's what's happening. 46,000 millimeters squared CPU. 3D stacked chips with memory built inside of it. That's what's coming. Things are about to change, people. Buckle up. Because within the next 10 years, things are going to get better. We're done stalling. The boring years are over. I'm excited. All right, let me move on to the rest of the notes here. So that was that, and that was a really cool thing. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff about Intel and stuff I heard by talking to, actual people. I think I'm going to save most of this for videos. It definitely feels like Intel's woken up. I'll say that. The Intel's not screwing around anymore. I just worry they woke up too late and that they still don't get how bad things are completely. And that brings me to the main title of this video. It's been 18 minutes long. I met Jim Keller. I met Raja Koduri at the Hot Chips thing. So at the Hot Wings Hot Chips thing. So let me get rid of my notes and full screen this so I can actually see your questions. So if you have questions now, you can ask them. But so they bust us out to this private golf course place where they served us glasses of wine and beer and good wings and stuff. And then there was this stage, which had milk and a table, and I was like, oh, they're going to bring out Jim Keller and Raja Koduri, and they're going to make them sit on stage and eat hot wings while we ask them questions, which is what they did. And there was Ian Cutress next to me and Charlie Shrimp from Semi-Accurate and a bunch of other journalists and reporter people. And I was there next to them. And I taped the whole thing, by the way. I just need to make sure I get the sound quality right. Don't worry, guys. I taped a 25-minute conversation with Jim Keller and Raja Koduri debating Moore's Law. I'm not kidding. That video was recorded on my phone. I put it on my laptop too. I've sent it to and I'm talking to my audio engineer about if we can clean up the audio a little so it doesn't seem so crappy. So I almost just uploaded it blank tonight, but I thought you guys would appreciate if I looked over the audio first before sending it to you guys. So that should come out sometime in the next week. 25 minutes of two geniuses talking. Oh, I get the notification bell now. Oh, good. But yeah, so that's coming. But what wasn't taped is I got a chance to I met Raja Koduri, really nice guy. I was like I told him I thought Vega was great, and he like kind of like bowed and was like, "Oh, thank you." And I'm like, "No, yeah." And he has very different ways of thinking than Jim Keller too. They're actually kind of funny to see together. But then I also sat down next to Jim Keller. I'm not kidding. Eating wings, and struck up and he was talking to some people. He started talking to me, and I brought it up to him. What do you know? I don't know what you think the future of all processors is, but I want to talk about silicon now and the next 5 years of silicon and what we can actually solve. And what I brought up to him is I do, and this is something Cortex has mentioned, something that I've mentioned before, is I think the future of silicon is combining a bunch of threads together to run one line of code down the threads. So you combine the threads into one line and you can just run the code across all of it. If you could do that and it didn't stall, and in fact, what I've heard is it should have less stalls, it would be the most powerful line of code ever. I'm sorry, the most powerful processor ever. And here's the thing, though. Jim Keller seemed pretty dismissive. Like, that's not the analogy he used, though, is it's just not that easy because multi-threaded applications are like talking to a person. And then I was like, oh, you're right. If I talk to myself in my head, think of it. Everyone listening, think of it. If you have a conversation in your own head, you can have a conversation that's paragraphs long in a minute, easily, just done. You can just have a conversation in your head. You can go, I want to do this. You can literally think about something without completely enunciating the words out loud in your head. If you're talking to another person, it takes much longer. That's what multi-threaded stuff is like. That's when you start to realize this guy is a genius, by the way, is it took like a minute to catch up with how he talks. And then once you do, you realize he's using these crazy abstract metaphors quickly, which was good. But in overall, what he said is that is the future. The future is combining threads to run a single line of code, but we're not there yet because you can't use 8 threads. You can't use 16 threads. It's going to take hundreds of threads to make that work effectively. At least in Jim Keller's opinion, that's what it's going to take, which is interesting because Cortex said a company's working on that. And so now I wonder if it's Intel or if it's ARM that's working on this. I really wonder who's working on it then, because he never did nod his head when Cortex never nodded his head when I said it's Intel, right? I don't know, but he had a lot of other interesting opinions too. So also, RISC-V seems to be the future. It's pretty much all anyone's talking about. NVIDIA is apparently going to use it. Supposedly Intel's done with ARM architecture. They just want to move to RISC-V, just so you guys know. Trying to get out everything else. Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to be doing a lot more videos about specific concepts from everything I learned here. But I mean, I talked to Jim Keller for a while, and I met a lot of people. Do Q&A. It is late though. Let me see the time. I'd say I've got about 10 minutes before I fall apart because I'm tired. So that's my recap of today. That's all of the bombshells that I went through. I have that video with the interview with Raja and Keller. Well, not interviewed, them talking to each other on stage. I just filmed it. So yeah, it's midnight. Any questions here, people? Have I just talked about talking to Jim Keller about the future of silicon, and I'm being asked what I think about Alienware's 55-inch gaming monitor. Well, I'll tell you what I think. I think it's stupid. I mean, guys, LG's making. I have it. LG. I have LG's HDR 120 hertz 4K gaming monitor. Alienware is charging 4,000 for the same thing. What a joke! It's probably worse too, if I had to guess. It's probably worse. What was Jim and Raj's opinion on Turing and RT? Guys, they don't worry about that stuff. I'm gonna let you know that everyone thinks that's pretty dumb. There was a lot of shit talking about tensor cores too from some companies, although others are also working on it. So it's hard to say. Again, guys, I talked to Jim Kellers. They don't worry about the 5800 XT, but no, there was no real information on the 5800 XT except that I've already told you guys. I think it's out this year. I think Raj's beard looks pretty good. I think it looks great. Any power buzz? Again, with IBM, they've got their own approach to scaling, right? They want modular standard architectures, ones where you can use any RAM you want, with any CPU you want, with any graphics card you want, and it all works together easily. You just slot it in the DIMMs and scale it up in a powerful way. That seems to be IBM's solution. It was interesting. Traditional is the word I might use, a traditional way of organizing. They're not going the way AMD is with entirely different ways of building CPUs, but they want an interface that's significantly better than everything else. Oh yeah, that's something I forgot to mention, which I probably will in a video, is that an Intel engineer went up and asked IBM, how they think they can lead the charge with this open interface that's low latency and can be used for both PCIe and Infinity Fabric when we have this thing. And the IBM guy said, "Yeah, I saw your brochure. I don't believe yours is real." He said that to Intel. He said to Intel, "Yeah, Intel, I saw your brochure, but I will believe it when I see it." That was an interesting moment there in the audience. What can replace ring bus architecture for low latency? Well, it's interesting. AMD talked about that for a while on stage, and they said doubling the cache size brought the latency penalty down to almost nothing, but that they had to decide like between cost, die size, min-maxing how big they could make the cache. But it seems like AMD thinks, die shrinking and making the cache larger will make this latency penalty less and less and less over time. So I'd say that's something you guys should understand there. The ring bus just doesn't seem to scale anymore. There's dual ring bus, but I don't know. If you can just use massive amounts of cache, especially with HBM3 and other types of stacked memory, I think that's probably a better solution. Yeah, IBM, dude, that guy was having nothing. Yeah, IBM totally called BS on the Intel slideshows, which was a little bit of an issue I had. Like the spring crest thing I saw from Intel was very impressive. A Volta killer, right? It's twice as strong as Volta, but it's not out yet, and they're saying it's twice as strong. And they actually barely had benchmarks. They were going over the architecture, but they barely had benchmarks. Oh, almost knocked that over. And it is true. It's like there's just I remember when AMD was doing bad, and people made the joke that AMD is a PowerPoint company. I'm worried Intel's turning into a PowerPoint company. Yeah, wait, side channel attacks. Wait till you see the Q&A part with Raja and Jim Keller. There's actually some weird conversation. I don't know. I do worry that Intel's not taking some of this stuff seriously, to be honest, guys. Is there any major architectural difference between Zen 3 and Zen 2 Plus? Yeah, there's massive differences. I guess I can almost see your point, but what we know now is they're probably going to add stacked memory on die for Zen 3 in addition to adding more threads per core. I mean, right there, that's a different architecture. More threads per core, that's a new architecture. Um, and that's just what we know now. We don't know what other tweaks they're doing to the architecture because we won't know that until it's out. Carbon Cry, I'll plug your Fabric article, but it's not on Medium or anything yet, right? I haven't read it yet. There will be another article added to my website. Let me plug that just in general. Moore's Law is Dead has a Medium now. And on my website, you can read my article. The first one is about what you need to understand before you can understand Bitcoin. I know a ton of people's eyes just glazed over because I said Bitcoin, but the idea of this article is kind of getting roadblocks out of the way that prevent you from understanding Bitcoin. So that type of thing, that's what I put on my website. Give it a try. Try it out. I'm Omir now. Carbon Cry is also writing an article on Fabric and and not like the fabric on this bed here, but fabrics for communicating between chips. It's going to be pretty good. So that's also going to be on my website, written by him. Again, Moore's Law is Dead as a platform, people. I want to scale this up to be a small tech website, YouTube, big YouTube channel, and podcast. Yeah, I know. You can have a ton of threads. I haven't seen anything from VIA, and that's an interesting question someone asked me earlier today is what is the proportion of people, like who's at this conference? It's a lot of Intel employees, a lot of a lot of eager college students at Stanford, and a decent amount of ARM people, and just educational professors and higher level managers from all over the world. I talked to a guy from Germany who actually really liked NVIDIA's uh, Xavier and other embedded chips. Um, that's actually its own video, probably too, talking to that guy. Um, but yeah, lots of those types of people. What's with this 46,000 millimeter square die? Watch this whole video. It's a real thing. Well, we think it's a real thing. I want to wait for real benchmarks. The interesting thing is they said, can it run all types of code? And he's like, yeah, this is a CPU. You just can run normal code. So it's like the implications are interesting. Like, I wonder, I would not be surprised, and I'll probably do a video on this too, with node shrink slowing down, right? We're still on 16 nanometer, right? Even 12 nanometer is basically the same thing. We've been on 16 nanometer since 2016, so 3 years. It used to be you'd be on a node for 1 year. We're on it for 3 to 4 or 5 years now, usually. What does that mean? I think it means we should be making bigger reticle limits. Like, why are we stopping at 600 millimeters squared? If we're going to be stuck on a node for 3 or 4 years, make it 1,000, 1,200. You're not going to get to the reticle limit for the first 3 years. But then that last year, when the yields get really good, you can make mega dies and still get benefits. Imagine if Intel's 14 nanometer could scale to like 800 millimeters squared. They could probably make up for some of their problems right now. That's an interesting thing I want to explore. Yeah, I think SMT4 is kind of going to be the standard moving forward for most applications. 8 is highly specialized, highly, 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 highly specialized. And I think 3 might be usable for most apps. Let me see. I guess I'll say this too. Someone brought up quantum computing to Jim Keller, and he goes, Yeah, I've been to Disney World. We don't want to talk about, and I don't remember what I said. I actually did say this in the audience. It was small too. The audience was like the size of this room. It was a very small event. And he was just like sitting there and he was just like, quantum. I'm like, let's talk about real things. And he's like, yes, please. Can we have real things? Jim Keller completely dismissed quantum, which made me feel good because I've completely dismissed quantum computing too. It's not real, guys. It's not real. It's not going to be a real thing for like 20 years. What would I do with a physically bigger chip? Well, you can do a lot. You can even spread out the transistors more so they don't heat up as much, right? Dan's law is dead. See, I know. I like that Dan said that in the podcast. Dan's law is dead. I'm like, shouldn't it be Moore's law is Dan? I think Moore's law is Dan sounds better. But you guys are typing on. So I'm going to be honest, guys. I'm going to go to bed soon. You guys got a tipper. This chat's scrolling pretty fast here. I like the podcast too. I've heard it's pretty good. I'm getting pretty tired though, and it's getting late enough that I'm gonna have to get up at some point. And let's see what's going on tomorrow. What do we got going on? I know NVIDIA is doing a ray tracing demo. I know Microsoft's doing HoloLens, which I'm actually very interested to see that. Tesla will be there. TSMC is doing a big keynote, which will be very good, I'm sure. It's TSMC. Let's see what else. Yeah. Runtime surveillance on Xeons. I don't know what that's going to be about. What? I mean, security on Xeons. What security? I wasn't aware there was security on Xeons. Did I hear about Minecraft ray tracing with NVIDIA? Hey, I honestly do think ray tracing Minecraft is the one game where it looks really good. I think it looks good in Minecraft. So there you go, guys. Get ray tracing to play Minecraft. Oh, just a quick yes or no will suffice. You guys know you can rewatch this video, right? Yeah, TSMC's growth is interesting. Yeah, TSMC is making 46,000 millimeter squared chips right now. That's interesting when Intel can't make a. Yeah. By the way, that 46,000 millimeter squared chip's probably going to be like 400. I'm sorry, like 10,000 watts or something, according to some people I talked to. Quake RTX. Yeah, I know, and it doesn't even have sound, right? So when you're doing, someone just asked, what would you use a 46,000 millimeter squared chip for? When you're doing deep learning, some of the tasks, some of the things you're doing can be using the same data other cores could be using at the same time. So having, and this is the interesting thing, that 46,000 millimeter squared chip, all of the memory it needs is built on the chip. It has gigabytes of cache. And I mean L3 cache, not L4. It's ultra low latency. So if you're doing deep learning, all of the memory it needs is on the chip and it can reference each other fast. That's why you want a giant chip. Deep learning, it's all about latency, low latency, and brute forcing. That's why. And they're doing things differently. That's why I like it. I want companies to do different things. I want a 46,000 millimeter square chip because why the fuck not? I want die stacking. I want 3D chips. I want HBM3. I want multi-chip GPUs. I want new things. I'm so tired of everything just being it's clocked faster or it has more cores. I want different cores. I want massive monolithic chips. I want things to change. Okay, so let's see. Any last minute questions, tips, anything you guys want me to look for tomorrow? Because the scroll is racing right now really fast and I'm getting tired. So if there's no tips, I think I'll just see if I get a chance to do a live stream tomorrow as well. And, there's people on the Discord too. So that's where you diehard fans can ask me questions too if you're in the boardroom or any of those exclusive chats here. But yeah, I mean, AMD did two presentations today, so I don't think AMD's doing that much tomorrow, but we'll see. Yeah, Tesla Autopilot will be a. Here's a tip: Moore's law is dead. Okay, what is my favorite sofa flavor? I usually like eating leather sofas. I think he may have had a typo. I know I have a lot of energy. I'm clearly doing a lot. By the way, I've got two banked videos and a podcast I recorded with the good old gamer I can drop whenever I want. So that's coming in addition to the Jim Keller and Raja video and all the other stuff I'm doing. Oh man. Yeah, Discord's not in the description because you need to be a Patreon member, man. You want me to meet these people, you got to support me. Sum up the RX5. I like this question for some dumb reason. Sum up the RX 600 series in 5 words. It's to compete with MX 250. Done. That's all it is, guys. Don't freak out that there's an RX 6. Yeah, that works. That's what it is. Go look up the die size. They're like 100 millimeters squared. They're for OEM laptops. That's what the 600 series is for. Oh, yeah. I'll see Jensen Huang tomorrow, I think, right? See if I can touch his leather jacket. That would be good. It was weird. Lisa Sue is a good presenter, by the way. That was interesting actually seeing her. But meeting and shaking Jim Keller's hand was crazy, though. It was just, and he's just a normal guy. Man can drink, by the way. The guy can drink. Okay. All right. All right. I'm going to bed. You know how to support me. Support me on Patreon. If you do, you can join the Discord. Send me, have exclusive conversations where I talk with you what I'm working on, what I know in the industry. And of course, that's what makes the show possible. And keep in mind, it's not just a YouTube channel. I'm writing articles, I'm editorializing and promoting other people's articles. And I do a podcast every week and a half where I talk to people in the industry. Support me on Patreon. I'm like 3 channels worth of content. Come on, guys. All right. Otherwise, you know what? Share all of my videos, ring the bell button, like me. I'll subscribe. I'm sure I'll be tweeting out more stuff tomorrow too. I am in Silicon Valley. All right. Good night, everybody.